It is my pleasure and privilege and honor to facilitate this panel, Queer Black Histories, Creating Archives for Ourselves. My name is Nick Boston. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Journalism and Media Studies at Lehman College of the City University of New York, and also a member of the Board of Directors of CLAGS. And I am going to introduce our fantastic panel, and we will kick off the event. Okay, immediately to my left is Stephen G. Fullwood. And Stephen G. Fullwood is an archivist, writer, and editor. He previously served as the assistant curator of the Manuscripts, Archives, and Rare Books Division at the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture. Just being mindful of time, I'm just going to introduce the speakers by a couple of sentences from their bios, and the audience can access their longer bios online. So that is Stephen Fullwood. Besides Stephen, we have Yanni. I myself am accessing the bios online. We have Yanni Young. And Yanni Young is a queer African-American and Afro-Jamaican multidisciplinary artist from Harlem, NYC. Yanni's current mediums traverse documentary and textiles with an interest in archives. And beside Yanni is Christopher, and Christopher Stahling. Christopher Stahling is a multidisciplinary why am I having trouble with that word today? Multidisciplinary artist and community practitioner from Harlem, working at the intersection of mental health, archival practice, and storytelling. As curator of In the Life Archive 2.0, Everybody Needs a Witness, he documents and preserves the lives of Black, trans, non-binary, and queer people across the African diaspora. So I'm going to hand over to Stephen. Enjoy.
Good morning, everyone. Some of you are getting it. I used to be a children's librarian, and so I need to hear you. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Yes, thank you so much for coming today. Nick, thank you so much for introducing us. We really appreciate it. I want to thank the CLAGS, the Queer Class Relations Conference organizers and volunteers, and I would also like to thank Matt Brim for reaching out to us to do this project. This work means a lot to us, and we have spent a lot of time doing it with various communities, and we've largely spent our own money doing this work. And so today you'll hear from my fellow panelists, Yanni Young and Christopher Stahling, and as a way to get us started, I'd like to ask Yanni and Christopher, in that order, to kind of talk a little bit about how you got started doing this work, and they have some slideshows to show you. So, 1 second. Yanni?
Okay, hi there. My name is Yanni Young, and as said before, I'm a queer multidisciplinary artist from Harlem. So yeah, I'm just going to go through this project that I started a couple of years ago called Coming in Stories. It was an oral history project, and but still is, where I interviewed Black LGBTQ elders in Harlem as a way to sort of document and preserve their stories, but also to get an understanding of what Harlem was like for Black queer people, sort of like post-Harlem Renaissance. So this is my oral history career archive, Coming in Stories, documenting the lived experience of LGBTQ plus elders in order to preserve their stories. Oral history as placemaking, what once was is no longer, and these elders were able to share their stories about the places and spaces that used to exist. So as a part of this project, I would take Polaroid photos of all of my subjects, all of my interviewees. Some of them are actually like close family friends. Some of them were people that I met sort of out and about. There's 4 photos at the bottom that have this quilt top background. Quilting is also a part of more of a recent practice of mine that I've sort of included in memory work. And so when I started this project, this is like before I really knew how to make a quilt. I decided to make a quilt top, and one of my elders, who I actually interviewed at the top, her name is Legia. She's born and raised in Harlem and actually lives like a block up from me. But she like really affirmed me in this process because she was like, "You're doing this quilt top, not even recognizing that like is your ancestors, and so like you're doing this thing and you're interviewing us." And yeah, she was just like making the connection between the two, and so I decided to continue with that. So before I play this video, this is one of my beloved elders. I call her Iya Imani, but her name is Imani Rashid. She's an educator, Yoruba priestess, community organizer. She just turned 86 years old. She's a Pisces. Yeah, she's just a really wonderful person. She has like a ton of like queer, trans, godchildren. Like being around her and being in her home was, I feel like, really one of the first times that I was around just nothing but queer Black people. And she's really beloved in her community. So I wanted to share a clip of hers, and then after our clip, I'm going to share another interviewee.
Right after that, my best friend Ma'ua, this is her picture here, best friend Ma'ua. She's right here in the center. And she said, "Oh, we're going to Egypt, we gotta go to Greece right afterwards." So Ma'ua was a few years, she was about 12 years older than me. And she said, "We gotta go to Greece." And that was important because everyone else came back to New York, and we were waiting in the airport for the next plane to take us to Greece, right? And when we got there, I mean, we had someone we knew there that we could stay with, but we went off to Lesbos, the island, and I said, no. Lesbian doesn't describe us. It's not, I don't like that word. And so, what I tend to do, I say a number of things. I'll say same gender loving. I'll put lesbian in there because I want to put Black first. Black, same gender loving, lesbian, elder. I guess that's how I would say it right now. That's what comes to mind. But and also I embraced the word queer even before I knew. Okay, so where we are.
Okay, so that was Iya Imani. And really quickly, I wanted to say I actually met her at the Leslie Lohman Museum a few years ago. and she was standing in front of this. There was like a section in the museum. It was organized by the Lesbian History Archives, and she was standing in front of this really beautiful portrait. I actually wanted to like see the thing that she was standing in front of, but I overheard her talking to someone, and like she was telling this person that she was from Harlem, and me being like sort of like the nosy, but then also like I'm going to take this as my opportunity to introduce myself. That's what I did, and I introduced myself, and I was like, yeah, like I'm from Harlem, and I was like, and I'm queer. So I was like, would you be interested in doing something with me? She was like, yes, take my partner's number and then we'll coordinate. And I said, all right, cool. And so since then, I've been like helping her archive her materials and organize her materials. A lot of it is just like throwing stuff away and sorting them in boxes and moving things up from her basement. But yeah, I just want to give that like extra tidbit because yeah, she's just a very open person, and she had no idea who I was, so. But this person that I'm going to show up next, her name is Tracy. I've actually known her since I was a child. She has been braiding in Harlem for like over 40 years. She's born and raised in East Harlem, used to braid my older brother's hair. She's just like known and beloved in the community, and she's just another person that I was like getting my hair done, and I was like, I'm working on this project. Would you be interested in me interviewing you? And it was really simple. She was like, yes, absolutely. And I'm now supposed to be working with her on a documentary of hers that she wants to produce of herself. But yeah, she's just another really great person. So she's going to be next.
Now, this is my playground. I was home. I lived with my mother all my life pretty much. I was actually around my mother in this very community when I decided to be me. And the individual, which I will leave nameless, that brought me out, lived in my building. And that was just too close for comfort for me because I didn't want nobody in my business. To be honest, I felt comfortable keeping my identity to myself, yet dressing how I choose to dress, which is always comfortable. I wasn't the female that wore the tight jeans, had to walk around being somebody I wasn't, and still having dudes attracted to me looking like one of them. So it really wasn't even hard to come out because I never was in. I mean, I don't know really what more to say about that, but yeah, I was home. I never told my mother about my lifestyle, but I'm almost certain she wasn't. I'm almost certain, but I never came out my mouth and said, "Mom, you know, this is how I am," and I was just thankful I had 2 children, to be very honest. I'm very grateful I had 2 children, and a young lady that like pretty much brought me out in the open as far as not hiding our relationship. She has a child, and she only had 1 child, so we pretty much merged our families, and we was good. We was good for, I think we did 2 years. But it was a tad bit unbalanced because when you're young, you can be a ball of fire. When you're young, it's like everything agitates you. Unfortunately, that young lady has such a, this is crazy, she has such a tight hold on me that even my associates couldn't really hang out with me. I couldn't be around certain people because unfortunately she always felt that I was attracted to this one or attracted to that one. I'm like, girl, you can't be serious. So that kind of used to throw me a little off because I don't ever want to feel like I'm that insecure where I can't allow my partner to just be free.
Yeah, so that was Tracy. That was the last interview that I was going to show you. And the last thing that I wanted to talk about was memory quilting. So on this table here, it's the second quilt that I've made in this ancestral quilt series. And so a part of this like practice of memory keeping, of preserving our histories, preserving our stories, I decided to get into quilting to preserve like folk narratives, folk histories, our ancestors and ancestral practices. I come from like a long line of women on my mother's side who quilted, I learned that like my great-great-grandmother knew like weaving, which I've just started learning how to do. Women made clothes, and on my mom's side, my family's from Louisville, Georgia. My mother's from East Harlem. My grandmother told me stories of how her family, to like make money, the women would come together and quilt together and do community quilting projects, and they would use like found materials that they had in their home because they couldn't afford to buy new fabric. And so that quilt, everything on the quilt is just like old clothes that I had because I wanted to challenge myself. Even though my grandmother said I was lazy because I used a sewing machine and they sewed with their hands. But yeah, and then all of the images on this are images of my maternal ancestors, which I'm grateful to my aunt because she actually considers herself the family archivist, and she has a lot of like our elders' photos. And so then quickly, these quilts that I have on here, the one on the far left that has this cowrie shell design is in the shape of the Bakongo cosmogram. And I was like learning about hoodoo, which is an African-American folk practice, and I'm really interested in like the ways in which that like Black people throughout the diaspora, we've preserved like our African indigeneity. And so the Bakongo cosmogram comes from the Congo Kingdom, but it can also be found in the Black Southern Church, especially like through the ring shout. And so I thought that I would be, great on there. And then I started making quilts for people. The two quilts are at the end are two quilts that folks commissioned me for. And in that process of making these quilts for these two people, I like sat with them, I interviewed them, I learned about their families, where your family from, what are some symbols or images or things that bring you to the people that you belong to. And so the one on the far right, this woman that I've actually known for a while, she's Haitian, adopted, family's from South Carolina. So she has like a lot of, just different influences. And so I like appliqued for the first time. You can't really see it, but like appliqued the symbol of South Carolina. And so just used different things, and I hand stitched her ancestors' names on there, the people that she was really close to and the people that she feels like watches over her. And that to me is like also just a part of memory keeping. It's sort of like bringing in other folks into my quilting practice, and then also letting them have the quilts because that's who they're for. So yeah, that's it. Thank you so much.
Good morning. How you doing? My name is Christopher Stahling. I am the curator of two things. Curator of the Inner Life Archive 2.0, Everybody Needs a Witness. I'm also the founder of the Black Witness Lab, a community archival hub where we support people to learn about archives and to do their own archival work. So I'll begin. Who am I, right? So that's a picture of me as a baby with my grandmother, who's now been dead now for 28 years. But it's important for me to always begin with who I am and who I love, because I came from love and I am love. So the work that I try to do is to connect people through love. My grandmother died when I was 10, and I want to say around 7 years old, there was something going on TV. It was related to queerness. She paused the TV and said, "If you're going to be the F word, be a king first." I was like, "Who are you talking about? Who are you talking to?" She crazy. But then she started to say, well, if you don't decide who you're going to be, they're going to tell you who you're going to be every day, right? So you must decide for yourself who you're going to be and stand in that. And I didn't get it then, but when my queerness emerged and it evolved later on, this story that she told me before she died in my head. So I always want to honor who raised me and who I belong to. And I encourage you to do that too. So the work that I do is infused with the things that I've been a part of, or things that are connected to. So I went to a Black college, I went to Morehouse, I'm born and raised a native of Harlem, New York. I worked at Schaumburg where I met Steven. I first became a volunteer in 2011, and then I was a former employee in the Manuscripts Archives Rare Books Division in 2014. I'm also an AME, so growing up up under the church, I was the person who did the bulletin boards, helped with programs, helped facilitate workshops and teach. So a lot of the skill sets, a lot of the dreaming work that I did around Black people, around love, around community, I learned from those spaces. I also went to school to be a therapist, so when I do oral history, the questions I ask are not focused on your resume or something you built, but more about who you love, who you belong to, how you're friends. So 2.0 was created after I left Schaumburg. So I left Schaumburg in 2016 and during COVID, actually before COVID. So the original evolution of the project came from Black portraitures at NYU. We were having dinner with Cheryl Clark, Lexus DeVoe, and Steven, and Cheryl leaned over to me and said, "Hey, what you working on?" I was like, "Nothing, I'm just a little gay boy, whatever." She said, "Yeah, you playing, but what you working on? We need you, right? We need you to do something." So the following year during COVID, my best friend at the time, Kendrick Day, said, "Well, hey, you have all this skill from Schaumburg, you're not using it, what you gonna do, right?" So during COVID, I raised some money, got an iPad, and started interviewing people. Also during COVID, Colin Robinson had just died. He was a poet, a writer from Trinidad, part of gay men of African descent, part of other countries, and he was on my list of people to interview. And when he was dying, Stephen was like, "Yo, we gotta get him, record him," and he passed. And I felt like, well, I didn't have any money. I can't pay for a Zoom. I can't pay for this. So the Colin dying, Black portraitures, COVID inspired me to kind of get to the work sooner and faster. But we, at the Oral History Project, we tried to make it intergenerational. So the first 15 of them, I cooked. People came over for dinner. We drank wine, and they kind of shared their life stories. A lot of people didn't feel worthy of being archived. They felt like, well, I didn't write a book, and I didn't go to college, or I didn't do this thing. And I was like, but if you lived, you're worthy of being archived. So oral history is great because we get to capture their voices, their smiles. Some people also gave me pictures of them when they were younger, talking about who they were back then. Well, one lesbian talked about her lover for an hour, which was very beautiful. But I think the practice of oral history was really important because I wanted people to tell their story their way. I didn't want people to interpret it. I didn't want people to add color to it. I wanted people to tell me what it was and who was it. Also, Black queerness more globally is not something that is heavily researched or heavily studied. So I want people who are living it, who are doing and creating and building, to tell us how they did it, tell us how it worked or didn't work. Witnessing. So during COVID, I was drunk on YouTube, and as I always do, listen, when I am mourning and grieving, I seek my elders out. So James Bowen died the year I was born. He's from Harlem, I'm from Harlem. Watching an interview of his right before he died, he was looking at the camera, really upset, and said, "Everybody needs a witness." I said, "He's talking to me," right? So again, being a church kid, being from Harlem, this idea of witnessing means, how can I sit next to you and hold the story with you, right? So the biggest part of what we do for our project is to make sure that everybody who is Black and queer across the diaspora has a witness. So I ask people all the time, well, if you were a part of this organization, how does it work, right? If your partner is non-Black, how does that work? How is it building your families together? If you're a parent, you having children, how does it work? Because I want to create a roadmap of experiences so people can feel less alone in the world. We've done 75. This is year 6 of the project, and we've done 75 interviews thus far. The first person on top I want to highlight is Yamaya Pope. She went to Morehouse. She's a trans woman, a beautiful woman, also educated and brilliant and an educator. But her experience, she's the first person at Morehouse to transition at Morehouse. There were people who are trans who exist there afterwards, but she's the first person who did it while we're at school. Naji Omar has made a play called Little Black Book, and I supported him with his archive. So when he was doing the interviews and making the play, I said to him, how are you keeping the interviews? What are the questions? So we created a small mini archive around love, around Black gay men's journey with desire and pleasure. Some other topics we talk about are joy, HIV. So we don't focus on trauma in our conversation. So if you do share your positive in an interview, I always ask people about desire, about pleasure, about how they build connections, how they started dating after they got diagnosed. But we don't really focus on the trauma part. But dating, aging, building and finding community, there aren't a lot of stories of people who are black, queer, and Muslim, black, queer, and part of a fraternity, black and queer and Christian. So we ask people about those questions as well. Sex workers are a big thing too. We talk to people about. I keep a list of sex parties, flyers. I keep a list of gay clubs that are black, because most black spaces are not, we don't own the brick and mortar. We have a night or a weekend. So I try to keep those things. What else? Challenges. So to Stephen's earlier point, broke, right? So I did a lot of the work I've done is putting through my job. Right? I work for the city of New York. I'm a mental health worker. So it's really hard paying for everything sometimes, but also the hardest part is getting people to know that they are valuable and worthy of being interviewed. A lot of people want to share, but when I press record, they kind of get tightened up. For example, we had a guy who was from Philadelphia. He was a 35-year teacher. He was 70. And when he said, "Christopher, interview me. I said, "Cool, press record," and nothing to say. I was like, "Well, who were the lovers, and how was the things, and how was it dating?" And he was just like, "I don't want to tell that story." I'm like, "What story you want to tell?" So, a lot of people have had very colorful, full, beautiful lives, but they're very afraid to tell on people or afraid to dishonor people who hurt them. Another thing we have done too with the archive is support other people's work. So Mark Lockwood, who's currently a postdoc at Northwestern, I helped him with his dissertation, and he was archiving sex work and porn, and he's did a documentary on pornography, and he used the Latino era of black gay porn to do his dissertation. It was very beautiful. Timothy Jones is in Missouri right now. He just got his PhD from Stanford on black performance, pleasure, and male relationships. On YouTube, there's a group on Instagram called Recognize Our Pride, where they highlight LGBTQ people who are part of the Divine Nine. Divine Nine are the 9 black Panhellenic fraternities and sororities. So I did 9 interviews of people from organizations across the country. We put it on YouTube. I also created a group for gay alphas to build fellowship and community in New York called Compton Cullen's Corner. Compton Cullen, again, famous Harlem Renaissance poet, also was queer, had a queer lover, and we wanted to make sure those men knew they had each other beyond just being sexual objects. I want to make sure we are very clear about why the work is important. So if we don't preserve, share, keep, people are going to tell who black people were without our permission. So the danger of telling a single story, there's a clip from a podcast called Service Level. There are 3 black gay men who went to Howard. They're friends. It's still going on now. They're interviewing Patrick Eaton Polk, who's a filmmaker, writer, producer. And he started crying, talking about Luther Vandross. Now, Luther Vandross was never publicly queer, but the point of the archive for me is that Patrick kept saying, even in death, can Luther be free? Free to live, free to be, free to do whatever. So I was interviewing Luther, I would have asked him who loves him. Not if he gay or not, who loves him, how you navigate space, who takes care of you. There are a lot of people who are currently mourning people who were in the closet or who weren't free yet, and the archive can be a way to preserve those love stories too, not just outing people. This image in the corner I created to honor black gay men who have died of HIV. The names on the top and the bottom are from an elder who is HIV negative, but he did 35 years of HIV and AIDS prevention work. So I wanted to make sure the people he had loved were honored. There are a lot of people like Patrick Kelly on there, Charles Angel, who's the founder of GMAD. But if we don't save the stories, save the images, save the photos, the people really do die, right? But they don't die in our hearts and our minds. I also created this zine to honor the 20th anniversary of the leather organization. There's a group called Onyx. They've been around for 30 years. They were founded in Chicago. I wrote the history book for them using the zine. Another part is to pay other artists to make work. So I keep a list of people who are doing stuff, making things. So if I get some money, you can pay them to make something for the archive. So there are 3 people here. Alexis DeVoe, she is a poet, writer, professor. She wrote the first biography on Audre Lorde. Her paper's at the Schomburg. George Billinger Jr. is a Harlem native, born and raised in New York. He did HIV and AIDS work for 25 years. Cheryl Clark, as we all know, is a poet, writer, professor, lover, friend. But there aren't enough ephemera of black people who are queer and not enough things of people as they get older. So I wanted to make sure we encapsulate them in the season in their lives to show that we love them. This is 3 of 21 photographs. Or portrait, excuse me. The zine you see here, you see somebody familiar on the cover of it, sitting right there. 27 years ago now, Stephen Fullwood curated a collection of papers called the Inner Life Archive at the Schomburg Center for Future Black Culture. So I made this zine. The first half of it does the history of the archive of Schomburg, the programs we did, the events we did, because it's really important that like the largest black library in the country is in Harlem, and all you need to do to access it is have a library card. And he made sure that black people who are queer have something there for them. So their oral history, there's letters, there's photographs, there's movies and films, but this book is supposed to help us honor them as well as show people what we've done. You can also scan this too for the digital copy of the QR code. We also did a community awards to honor people who had worked with the archive. Because again, my work is inspired by Stephen's work at the Schomburg, so I try to either highlight what he's done or celebrate somebody who's currently living or connect people to the work I'm doing. I designed that award too. This year we made a calendar with people, organizations, and books that should be remembered. So you will often see this image in the back here. Dancing Figures is by Richard Bruce Nugent. I use it a lot to promote the archive because he was a black gay man, openly black gay man from the Harlem Renaissance, but also want people to not just focus on my work, but learn about somebody from the things I've done. This year is the 40th anniversary of 3 black gay legacy organizations, Gay Men of African Descent, Adodi, Other Countries. They were all founded in 1986. This is a photograph taken by Joseph Bean of Osato St. S.S. Field, Colin Robertson, to name a few, who were all part of other countries, right? So in the calendar I made a collage honoring each of these people to make sure that people knew who they were and what they were a part of. We have moved beyond just doing oral history, so I also take books, I collect ephemera, posters, and things. You can't archive a community you're not a part of, so I always want to make sure I'm in community with people, feeding them, taking care of them, loving on them, as well as paying for things too. So the future for my work, right, we're going to do more collaborations, make more art, make more zines, honor the elders and ancestors, right? S.S. Hinfield's birthday was on Thursday. That shirt that you see right there is one I made honoring him. I want to also support people with their archive and their work because people have so many things at home, so many memories that they don't talk about or preserve that I want to make sure we keep. The Black Witness Lab is something that's going to be launching in the fall. It's a digital space where people can learn about archives, connect on archives. We'll have 3 in-person events throughout the year to gather people together to, again, connect them with resources, support them with their programs and their events, as well as get them information about how to archive. And that's it. Any information you need, you can scan that to learn more about it. That's an image from a shirt that I made. But yeah, thank you. Oh, also, outside there's a brochure that I made for the Schomburg honoring the collection is free on the table. If you can get one, I have some more up here.
Thank you, Christopher. What do you mean you're not a millionaire?
I'm not. I'm on the corner.
Are you sure? Thousandaire?
I need to send some tricks.
Dollar-aire? So I mentioned money first because we're at a class conference, and a lot of the work that I've noticed is happening this afternoon, but this afternoon, yesterday, and as well as just noticing it, most of the Black queer archives that I know about today are by people like you, people who spend their own money, occasionally might take donations, but for the most part, you guys are funding this. And so can you talk a little bit about what that means? You talked a little bit about it earlier. Can you talk about it, Yanni, as well?
Yeah, so when I think of funding my own work, honestly, it fluctuates because it's like when I have the funds to do the thing that I need to do, that's when I can do it. So like with this Coming in Stories project, when I started the project, I didn't really have my own camera, so I borrowed a friend's camera. That friend moved out of the States, so then I was like, okay, I don't have a camera. And so I just was like using whatever was available to me, which meant that like quality of, each video was a bit different. So yeah, it really looks like borrowing materials if I can borrow the materials. 'Cause that's kind of like the stage that I'm in now. When like birthdays come up, I'm like, hey, like I really need something. But yeah, it's really just like whenever I have the funds to buy the things, that's kind of how I do it. Lately, I've been using just like my cell phone because I've started also just like interviewing my family. So I just bring out my phone, I have them set up somewhere, and then that's just what I use. So I feel like the self-funding is really just using what I immediately have access to, just so I'm not doing anything. I would say being in school has been a bit helpful with accessing resources that I wouldn't have otherwise had access to. It's making me think of Material for the Arts, which I had been to before because of a fellowship that I'd gotten, and I went to again last week with a class that I had my professor set up for us because I was like, I knew that myself, I needed materials, and I was like, this is a crafting class, like, let me sort of like organize this thing. But yeah, this space where we just got a bunch of free materials. So spaces like that, like organizations that, because for me it was like, that was helpful with like quilting, like getting fabrics, thread, all the things that I need for like my crafting work. So yeah, just like relying on like orgs that provide free materials too.
Hello, yes. What do I do? I sell dinners. No. A lot of the art that I've made, so the zine, so a lot of stuff that I've done has been commissioned, and people pay for it. So a lot of the things that I have done is based on my salary from my job. If I'm doing anything extra, I pour it into the archive. But a lot of it, I used to have a website where people could buy things to kind of support the archive. But that's really been it. Been people donating, people love me, giving me money here and there. But yeah, that's it. There's no other. And also, I'm not a not-for-profit, so it's also really hard to like get money to do things because you have to like have a fiscal sponsor or have a 501c3. So there is money that exists that I've tried to get that I don't qualify for. So it's all been through me, which is why it's taking longer to do things, and also it's been a little more heavier to carry sometimes.
I get this question a lot, and that is, what are the most, in terms of things that you feel are endangered, things that you want to collect before they disappear, certain kinds of ephemera? As you mentioned, Colin Robinson was a colleague of mine. While he was nearing his death, it was kind of hard to, someone's transitioning, you want to be mindful of their space. But like, can you talk a little bit about what you aim to do primarily in your archival practice, because you know that stuff is subject to being erased or just disappearing? I'd like to hear from you both.
Something that comes up for me, and just with like recent, like working with Iya Imani, is just like a lot of like physical objects. So like one thing that came up when I was helping her recently was like journals, and her not thinking that thinking that people wouldn't be interested in her journals, or like, so like one of her journals from when she was, I think either like middle school or high school, she was like, oh, we don't need this. Like, I don't think anyone's going to want this. And I was like, well, I want it. And she was like, well, if you want it, you can have it. So I took it. So like, I think of stuff like that. I think of like recently my grandmother, she is in her mid 90s. And so she's been like getting rid of a lot of things over the years. And she had this like coin jar that belonged to her father that I remember seeing my entire life, never knew what it was until over on Easter, I had asked her what this object was. But I think about just objects that don't really exist anymore, like things that we've not seen before. I think personal items like journals. I mean, I know some people, I guess, are a bit iffy about those things, but I feel like those, I don't know, tell a lot about who a person is. I'm also really interested in like the books that people collected. Another one of my elders, Legia, she saved like all of these like party flyers, similar to what you were talking about with saving flyers. Like she saved a lot of those things. I mean, that's not something that we use now. It's not physical party flyers, but for her, that was something that she felt was really important to keep. And so she just has a ton of them in her home. So yeah, I think about like those things, like what the stuff that I see that other people, the elders, that they have, that I'm like, oh, this would be worth preserving and not just tossing because you think someone else wouldn't want to see it.
I think the thing I'm most worried about is all the stories. So there are things that people talk about over drinks and dinner they won't talk about when being interviewed, and some of those stories I need to keep. For example, George Billinger is not a writer, not necessarily somebody you would call shiny, but everybody who's anybody he know and has known, and a lot of these events in Black queer history, he was there for. So had I not got him drunk one day and pressed record, he wouldn't have told me the story. His interview was 4 hours.
There's a lot of drunk going on in your talks.
I mean, it's called a spirit for a reason. But I think, again, the photographs are in danger. Also, a lot of us are very digital, so we rely on social media for like our archive. And if Facebook, Instagram ever goes out of business, what happens to your pictures? So I want people to download their pictures, save them twice. I want you to interview your friends too, like y'all love journeys, how y'all became friends. Those things are important as well. But I think because it's so normalized in our culture, those things are going to be lost. Like again, when we memorialize Colin, I was like, there's 100 stories that I want more of that they don't want to share that way, and 2 won't ever be in the archive. Right? Colin's work is in the archive, but the fights, the love, the laughter, those things are not there. So I'm really worried about those things because our story as queer people are not wrapped up in just who hurt us. It's also about how we decided to live in spite of those things. And those things are not celebrated or archived intentionally. That just kind of like put on Instagram, put on a story, and kind of go away. So photographs, flyers, these stories, like interview the neighborhood drag queen should be interviewed, right? The sex worker, the sex party, like there are things that are very part of our culture that we don't talk about that should be there, that aren't there right now.
Thank you so much. For those of you, here's a PSA. So this is a project from the Joe Mitchell Foundation, and it's called Call, Creating a Living Legacy. And so I have a copy of this here. However, if you stop me after the program, I get your email, I can send you a PDF of it. What it does is it allows you as an artist, but the skill sets and the things that they're recommending here are transferable in terms of taking care of your archive. To your point about having a backup, for example, it's a practice to have the 3-2-1 backup. So you have 3 copies of things. You have the thing at your house, you have it on a hard drive, and then you may have another hard drive and put it somewhere else that's not in your house. So that you're always thinking about what your digital archive is, whether it's born digital or things that you've scanned over the years, you don't lose it. And so those are really important. There are a number of things on here that I wanted to share with you really quickly. One of the former librarian and archivist here, Shanta Smith, did this book with Sarah Howard called Grabbing Tea, Queer Conversations on Archives and Practices. And it's a really important document. If you can get this, please get it. It comes out of, I think, I forget the name of the press. Could you tell me what the press is? I'm 60. What is that? Somebody knows, yes. I just heard it, yes. I could just took off my glasses. I just wanted to play. I think it should be there in Verso. So while she's doing that, Carry the Word, a bibliography of Black LGBTQ books, over 600 titles. This was published in 2007, so you can imagine how many more books have been published since then. I co-published this with Lisa Seymour Redbone Press, and the archive was immensely important to us at the Schomburg Center and any place we could find books that were produced by and about people, LGBTQ people. And 2 more things, The Black Gay Genius, which was, again, published by my publishing company, Vintage Entity Press. Charles Stevens, who had the brainchild to honor Joseph Beam. Joseph Beam's papers wouldn't be at the Schomburg unless it because his mother took him there. So when she was told, when Joe Beam, who was the editor of the In the Life archive, who died in 1988, her friends told her to throw all that stuff away because it was just going to make her sad. And so she didn't throw his stuff away. She moved Essex Hemphill and his cat into her house. They finished what would become Brother to Brother, which was published in 1991, I believe. Then she took his stuff to the Schomburg Center. And so this particular zine honors her work. After her son died, she became a self-described AIDS activist and talked to families about losing a child or having a child that's queer and how to be with them. So this is a memento to her, because you got to do what you love and you got to honor the people that you love in the work that you do. And so that's partially what the work that I've done. And now we're going to move to another question. And we will have time for Q&A for those of you who are interested in finding out more about their work or my work. After the Schomburg, I was building, where I was building out the In the Life archive, there was this thing about trust. And since I had been in the Black queer community doing various things as a writer, journalist, but someone who's producing as an archivist, it was easy, very easy, for folks to believe and trust me when their archives came to the Schomburg. So if I asked, they were like, oh, you work at the Schomburg? Oh, absolutely. In fact, I'm flattered. Because up until that time, there weren't a lot of institutions. In fact, there were very few institutions. I wrote them all down, but I decided not to share, that they were not actively doing this kind of work. Sometimes what happens is, I've noticed when it comes to white-led institutions or even black-led institutions, unless it becomes popular in popular culture, that's when they actually start to collect things. So Schomburg had already been collecting Joseph Beam, Melvin Dixon, a number of other artists, so they already had a jump on collecting materials. So trust is really critical, and I look at you both, and full disclosure, these are my people. This is my family. I'm so happy I've got wonderful children here. I call them children, yes. I can call you children, right? I know, I mean, it's all relative. But they do wonderful work. How do you guys work with your communities and engender trust? Like, how do people go, Christopher, like, I trust you with my story?
They don't trust me. They don't trust me. It's funny because a lot of the work is labor intensive, running behind people, and a lot of people are very afraid of a couple of things. They're afraid of where the story going to go, and they are concerned about who going to get it, right? So you can't find any interview I've done anywhere on the internet. And one of the curation points is that I want to make sure the story is safe. Because most people I've interviewed are not people I know. So even though they don't trust me, don't know me, they do know that all I'm going to do is keep the audio, transcribe it, it's going to be in my house. In 5 years and 10 years, I'm going to give it to the Schomburg. They know that already, but you can't consume the story online because that allows anybody and everybody to have an opinion about it, and they also will curate what they tell you. So to get the best story possible, to get the most honest story, I do not share things on the internet, and I also... people don't trust me. People have over the years, because of me knowing Steven or Jafari or somebody who's vouched for me, will say, yes, I can trust Christopher. But generally, they don't. They're like, who are you? What you want to do? Why? Why do you care? And especially people who, again, don't feel worthy of being archived. A lot of them don't feel valuable or worthy. They feel like they just have regular lives. But we used to do a program at Schomburg called Ordinary People, and nobody was ordinary. Everybody was extraordinary. So I want people to know that I still do the work anyway, in spite of the fact that people don't trust me and people are afraid of their story being taken. And also, I try my best to just keep modeling behavior, showing them I'm trustworthy, but also just making sure I keep the thing safe, right? We do it on Zoom, I download it, they get a copy of it, they sign a release form. Anything that I do, I give them a copy of. But they still don't trust me though, generally. I'm just being honest, they don't, right? Again, out of the 75, I want to say 20 of them do, because they're friends of mine, but most people don't. I have to big it up a lot, and that takes like a year sometimes. And then they press record and go, I don't want to tell that story. I'm like, well, then why be here? But yeah, so yeah, a lot of them don't trust me. They don't. They do it anyway though, which I'm honored to, but they don't trust me.
Well, trust is something you build after a while. So even though you started this project, over the years they still get to know you, see that you're doing the work, that can help.
I also
in
want to say
general
too
that
that
trust.
because I'm not a grad student, I don't work at Schaumburg, I'm not getting a PhD, I'm not doing research. There's another hesitancy, like, well, hey, although so at Schaumburg, there are a lot of work done by volunteers, or by people who we call lay people. Most average people don't know that. So because again, I'm not getting a PhD, I'm not in grad school, I'm not part of an institution. They're even more concerned about why I want to do it and what I'm doing. So I'm just saying. So yes, to Stephen's point, yeah, over the years, I have proven myself. I'm just saying it's still a constant conversation. I got blocked last month from a trans man who goes to Morehouse, who I think is amazing, and I'm like begging him for his story. 'Cause I think if he shared it, somebody will be free from it. But he like, who are you? Where's it going? And we've been doing that for the last year, so it's exhausting. But yeah, I mean, yes, and they don't trust me. They don't trust me. It is. I mean, it's part of the work. Because again, it's. Being a witness, doing the work, doing memory work means that even if it hurts, I still gotta hold your hand, right? They belong to me. That's how I feel. So it's my responsibility to find some grace, some space to still do something, because if I don't, in 50 years from now, they're not included, something's lost. I curate thinking about who gonna need it later. Who gonna need that story later? Who gonna need to know this thing later? So if I don't push myself or them, we're going to be doing it for nothing. So I just, my politic around my blackness and my queerness makes me still try anyway, even when they don't want me to. So.
I actually want to piggyback on some of the things that you mentioned, because it makes me think about like the idea of trust. Yeah, like I think like it's showing up for people. Some of these elders, I kind of just like, if they need me to do something for them, I will do it. Or if they invite me to something, I try to show up to the thing that they're inviting me to. It's also me remembering to like make sure that like I make the effort to like check in on them and see how they're doing, because that's also something that one of the women that I interviewed sort of expressed, like, you know, just needing something, just needing an exchange. Let's just go out for tea. Like, let's just go out to the, you know, like a coffee shop, because she just wants to sit at the park. So it's almost like just being a community member. There's another elder that I was recently connected to a couple years ago, who, similar to you, of like wanting to interview someone and it kind of just goes on and you don't really get to that place. I've been wanting to interview her since I've met her, and she runs a couple gardens in Harlem. So like in the summertime, I just go to her gardens and I help her do things. And I've brought up my project to her. I've told her who was in the project, and similar to Chris, like none of my interviews are online. I actually don't really have them anywhere. The only time they're really seen is when like someone asks me to show it somewhere. But outside of that, they really just are on my hard drives. And she seemed really interested in the project, and I thought she would want to be interviewed, and then we never spoke about it again. And we kind of just like moved on, and then it just became like, you know, okay, there's like a volunteering thing this weekend. Do you want to come and do that? Yeah, sure. So it like, but it's me just building my relationship to her, and like there was something. Like I call her like a guerrilla gardener, and she had started like a garden plot like in the lot of her building that she just runs herself. And she had like invited me up for tea, and we were just like talking and chatting, and she's like a really cool woman. And she was talking about like her journey into motherhood, and she was like, you know, I got into mothering in a way that like, you know, lesbians weren't thinking about it at the time, like because she didn't go like the route of being in a relationship with a man, and she didn't even really tell me how she went about doing it, but she was just like really proud of the, like, I don't know, it was just sort of had a lot of pride in the fact that she navigated becoming a parent in a way that was not traditional, and that was like all that she was willing to share. And so she gives me like bits of information at a time that I just accept. So yeah, I think it's like, I don't know, I think that trust is just being in community with these folks, but then like also being really intentional about like how I build my relationship with them, ensuring that like they're not the only ones reaching out to me and hitting me up, like I'm actively checking in on them, which is, yeah, sometimes it's a challenge for me because sometimes I realize I don't reach out to people in the way that I should, and sometimes it's just that checking in. And so I found that even when I do that to the elders that I would love to interview, they're still so willing and like open to share things with me, even if it's not on camera, because they don't bring it back up again. But so yeah, I think it's like the building of the trust is just being in community.
Thank you both. I really appreciate it. So we're going to go to Q&A in a moment. But prior to that, I want you two to say three things. If someone in the audience would like to hear this on live stream, how to get your archive started. Three things.
Start where you are. If you got a shoebox, put it in a shoebox. It don't matter. Start where you are. What are you witnessing, and what's the evidence? Right. So evidence could be a T-shirt. It could be a photograph. It could be a love letter. It could be a correspondence. But what are you witnessing, and what are the evidence of what are the artifacts that give the evidence of those things? Third thing is start with yourself, right? Like start with self, start with people you know. So I would say everybody got a phone, and the phones have voice notes. Use your phone. Half of the interviews I've done have been on my phone. But again, start where you are. Do not wait. And interview your people. So the grandmamas, the aunties, the cousins, get the recipes down. Don't wait until somebody's gone. Especially too if you're from a different culture that's not American, I would actually want you to record people with your phone too and get like the recipes. So like don't write it down, sit with them and record them while they're doing that. I think that'll be dope because you'll get the language, the words, the things, and it will help add color to the recipe later. But yes, start where you are, evidence, artifacts, start with self and people, your people.
So the first thing that comes to mind, I was actually thinking of like, what do you think of like what's missing in your world? And the reason that I said that was because when I started my coming in stories, besides like some of my parents, like friends who I know are gay, queer, I mean not necessarily open, but and some of them are folks that I've interviewed, I realized that like I didn't have this like community of Black, queer people. I didn't really know a lot about like the spaces and the things that existed prior to me being born in Harlem. And so I just started like with what was missing. And then when I figured out like, okay, what was missing from what it is that I would like to see, that's where I started. Similar to Chris's, I was honestly just gonna say like your personal interests. Like my interests are like folklore. I love like, I really genuinely just love talking to people. So a lot of my project was about like placemaking and where they were in their relationship to their space. Yeah, and I think I'm just gonna steal from Chris again. I think just like, because he said like all really good things. But yeah, like starting with like the materials and what you have immediate access to. And yeah, so hopefully that sounds like a good 3. I feel like that was like 2-ish, but yeah.
Thank you so much. So I want to turn to you guys who've been sitting there so patiently listening. If you have questions for our panelists, there are two microphones on both sides of the room closer to the stage. We would love to hear from you if you have questions for us. Could you come up to the mic? We would love to hear you. This is being live streamed, so this is why we want folks on the mic. And thank you.
I'm a little bit small. Can you hear me? Yeah. Thank you so much. It's really inspiring. I'm also working on archiving, but in a very completely different context, which is Morocco. And we work on archiving since 2019 under extreme communization and a very difficult system, political. And one of the strategies that we are doing is that concerning like oral history is that we also ask people if they want to change their voices, for example. We can do that, change their names, make sure that they're not recognizable for the city or whatever. I'm just wondering if this is, because it's a very interesting question when we're archiving, we want visibility, but without also putting people at risk, and also making sure that there is an ethical understanding of what we're doing. So my question is actually, it's a question that I've been asking myself for years, and I'm sure that's you too. How can we also make sure that there is a visibility, but also without putting people at risk? And for us, in Morocco, we did find some strategies. I'm wondering if this is something that you're also doing in your work in archiving. Thank you. And really, thank you. It's great.
If you're interviewing somebody who's in danger of harm because of their story, like a political activist or whatever, I would think that makes sense for those things. But I always want to encourage people to not distort or unname, because the people who are going to need it need to know their names, right, and hear their voices, especially around a culture, right? There are accents in different parts of the country. There are different regional, cultural, religious things that might get lost in the distortion and distorting the voices. So I'm not saying don't do it. I'm saying just not put. If I was doing it, I would have 10 people, and those 4 people who have those issues, I wouldn't put them on the list, right? I would separate them and keep them separate from the major lists. And if somebody knew it, because like in Schaumburg, we have something called restricted files. So you can make a folder restricted where you have to actually get permission to get access to it. So those people, those stories who are sensitive or caution of harm, you might want to put a lot more curation around those things. But distorting the voice to me could ruin the story. There's so much in the voice and the laugh and the tears and the pain that we lose when we don't get all of it. But for me, I give people an option, right? You can do it anonymously. I could edit it out later, but I always try to encourage them not to do that. And if I hear a concern, I'll label it on the folder, and I know, and it's separated in my archive. But I don't encourage them to do that because there's the people who are going to need it later need to hear them say it in their words that way.
So I want to add to that because of the recent set of crimes that were created by colleges and universities all over the U.S. in terms of arresting students, professors, and other folks for simply demonstrating, right? So to talk to a couple self-made archivists or self-described archivists, people who were there, and they had the same concerns around safety, same concerns around photographs being used, digital photographs. And so a couple of the strategies were, they weren't distortion of voices, but they were definitely no names. They were clear that this material wasn't going to go on the internet. They were clear that this material wouldn't go to an archive without express permission of these people, but they were very thoughtful. It was really in the weeds. Not in the weeds, but they made sure that the most important part was the story, what happened here. But the students, the professors, and other activists, their names were disappeared from that. And so those were a couple of the strategies that I had heard from people who we were speaking with when we do tours and talk with folks, because we know how archives can be harmful. We know this. And so we're mindful of that, and we're also thinking through how to preserve those stories and those people, but also make sure that they are safe. There's a woman named Zakiya Collier who's a friend of mine, Black queer archivist, and she and I talk a lot about when people are doing work in the community, the most important thing is the community. It's not the archive. And their well-being comes first. And one of her statements is, if the well-being of the community doesn't come first, everything else is extractive. And so we need to be really mindful of how we collect, why we collect. I am a proponent of, and this might sound not intuitive, but it's just what it is. If you destroy something, if you say, hey, Stephen, I want you to destroy this after I pass, I'm going to do that. I'm not going to go, oh, it's good for the community, it's all that, because at the very least in the United States, where we talk about freedom so much and choice, I'm going to go with the community. I'm going to go with the people. I'm going to go with safety. So yes, I'm an archivist, but I'm also mindful of what it means to actually live in a free society and to try to move towards that, because we don't live in one.
If you have a question, come down. Question, come down. If you have a question. What's that? Oh. Oh, okay.
Stephen, you stay there. Stephen, stay out. I got it.
What happens if you only have a feeling that something is taking place? I'm sorry, good morning. My question is, can you follow up on, you were speaking about document what you were seeing, experiencing. What happens if you are not sure what you are experiencing, but you know it's something? So you collect the picture, you're taking the pictures, you're writing in your diary what's happening what you're feeling at the moment, but you are not sure exactly what it is you're witnessing or documenting.
So the first point I want to affirm is that if you're feeling it is in your body, then it's real, right? So if it's important to you, and because witnessing is not only about seeing, witnessing is also about sitting, right? So if you are sitting with a feeling is in your body and you feel like, hey, I think this is important, or I think it's valuable, that's enough, right? You don't have to make sense of it, put it in order, or conceptualize it. You have to just make sure there's something that honors with a artifact or a story for the thing you care about. But it's not necessarily about just seeing, right? Right now, if I was curating this year, I wouldn't be preserving the war. I would be preserving people's experiences with housing inequality and food and da-da-da. But the war was something that I care about that way. I care about the people experiencing these things or whatever. So start with the I statement, how you feel, how you think, what you know, what you value. If it's important to you, it's enough, but you don't have to be sure of anything, right? If it's in your body and you feel it, it's enough for me.
Yeah, something that came up to me, I mean, it's not my quote, but this is like trusting your inner knowing. So like if it's something that you know and similar to what you're saying, like that you feel, to sort of like follow that thing, even if it doesn't necessarily, you don't know how to make sense of what it is that you're feeling. I think that like, I don't know, I think that the feelings and things that come up for us are not necessarily random. And so to like follow the things that come up for us, because that's how I think about like some of these projects, where I may not necessarily have like the skill sets that other people have, or I may not necessarily have the experience that other people have, but I have this inkling, this feeling, this wanting to preserve these stories and to go about them in the ways that make sense to me. And so I just like, I follow that, and I kind of, by following that, I trust that will take me to wherever it is that I'm supposed to be. But yeah, very much to what Chris was saying, I think it's just like trusting the inner voice, even if it doesn't make sense like on a conscious or physical level.
To both of your points, and we have one question, last question, or maybe two, I guess now. And that is, archives are full of materials by people like you who had a sense, and they were like, why am I keeping this? Why am I keeping a stack of Ebony magazines? You know, all of that, right? Archives are full of those materials because someone had an inkling or a feeling, and they put it aside. So I just want to say that, and I'd love to go to our last two questions before we end. Oh, there are three questions? Oh, okay. Three. Could we make them very quickly, because we have to be out of this room by 1. Thank you.
So Yanni, as you're talking about getting to know your elders, it sounds like almost something that would belong in an archive. And so I'm wondering, you know, as you're collecting these stories, and there are some that you don't collect, and you're context that you might label, how do you decide what is interpretive, and is there an aspect of it that is, you know, showing the archivist inside of it?
Okay, so hopefully I'm making sense of your question. I guess like the folks that don't want to be interviewed, or like the folks that do want to be interviewed, I know with this, my presentation, I tend to show the same 2 interviews everywhere I go. Depending on like the comfortability, like Imani is someone who is like very open, very vocal, and very willing to be interviewed. Legia, who is someone whom I really love, who like, I'm very much in community with her, even though I haven't really showed much of her interviews. She was very much someone who I would say would be an example that Chris brought up earlier, where she felt like she wasn't worthy enough of being archived or being interviewed because she felt like she didn't have a shiny life or that she did anything. But I personally felt that she was an interesting human being. And so like sometimes I don't really show hers, even though I genuinely love the stuff that she shared. And so I think it's just, I guess it's just like the comfortability, or what I think that person would be comfortable like me showing those things. And honestly, then they just kind of sit on my hard drive. I hope that kind of answers your question. But yeah, I just base it off of like what the folks are comfortable with. And that's kind of like how I decide to show it. And so like even Tracy, like she's someone who really likes to sit in front of people and talk, and like she now wants to do her own documentary on herself and her work. And so yeah, I should base it off of that.
Hello, thank you so much for the work that you do and what you've shared. So my question is, it did not, okay, so there's a lot of value from what I picked up on. There's a lot of value in each of you that are doing these archival projects, that you have autonomy over them, because I think that's where sometimes institutions, when they start making archives from scratch, the criteria becomes very reductive very quickly, and when you know your community, and as Stephen expressed, the community is the archive, and the archive is the community, with that approach, it's just more expansive every time, right? So even though the lack of funding is a massive problem, your autonomy has so much power and so much value in maintaining the collections. That's the pretext to my question, which is, then how do you approach the appropriate institution that would enable the collection to grow or have a longer lifespan, but also to retain your autonomy, or the autonomy of someone from within the community?
There's a difference between donating and lending. So first find somewhere that aligns with you, aligns with with the community you want to serve, or aligns with the work you're talking about. So for me, I chose Schaumburg, because I know people at Schaumburg, I know how it works. Also, Schaumburg is free. So all you need is the library cards to do it. It's also by a train station. So all those things I'm thinking about. So when I die, people are going to use the Inland Archive 2.0, cool, you can get to it, right? If I did it at Columbia or Yale, it'd be harder to get to it, right? So find out who aligns. 2, you can set a stipulation. So once they have it, it's theirs, but you can also control intellectual property, so you can again lend it, they can borrow it, donate it, but you can set rules. Like, hey, if somebody wants to use A, B, C, and D, they need permission. Make sense? So their institutions have different rules across repositories, and so learn the ones that work for you, but also find somewhere that aligns with your values or the values of your community. I curate thinking about Schaumburg all the time. I think about the events they have, things they already have there, what's missing from Schaumburg. So when I'm trying to acquire stories, ephemera, books, I'm thinking about what they don't already have yet. Right, so my hope is to go to London or go other places in the African diaspora to document queerness. We have an artifact from that place. We don't, cool, I'm going to now get it, so when my thing goes to Schaumburg like that. But just learn the rules around the repository and figure out who aligns with you.
Hi. I'm sorry if this is a little unconventional, but I've been asked throughout the conference to echo a mutual aid ask from a Black lesbian archiving group in New York City, if it's okay for me to share. 2 of my best friends are co-founders of an organization named Living Lesbian Archive. LLA is a space for Black lesbians who are interested in cultivating community amongst fellow Black lesbians and producing archival artwork to document their lives. Please follow them on Instagram. It's Living Lesbian Archive. They host a monthly zine night where everyone contributes to a monthly issue, each featuring a variety of works by Black lesbians in New York City, Atlanta, and DC, based on a monthly zine. LLA has 2 co-founders, my friend Ellie, who passed last January. Ellie was perfect, and they joined the devastating reality of Black queer ancestors who were lost too soon. And I think something really beautiful about archives is that they also archive the archivist's love for their community, and they're continued to be held when they're gone. I'm 22, and Ellie was my first experience of queer loss, so I just wanted to say their name out loud in this room because they would have loved your work, and they would have loved to be here. Their co-founder, Taj Martin, was accepted into an archival residency program in Valencia this July. It would help them learn more about archival practices and techniques, and they've been really hesitant to ask for support. But as we were talking about, Black people, and especially Black lesbians, are often excluded from these spaces for monetary reasons. So my ask is just that if people feel so inclined and could Venmo Taj to be able to attend this experience, their Venmo is TAGH-MARTIN-1, and I can repeat it if people need. But it's TAGH-MARTIN-1. So I'm sorry to take up space with that, but I appreciate your guys and your work.
Thank you. Thank you. So please thank my wonderful wonderful panelists, Yanni and Christopher Stahling. And thank you, Nick Boston, for introducing us. And we'll be around if you guys have questions for us. We appreciate you coming today. Have a wonderful rest of your afternoon.
And I would also like to thank Stephen G. Fullwood for a fantastic job at not only moderating today, but a very long history and career in archiving and preserving histories, as well as our fantastic panelists and the incredible work that you do. Thank you very much.